Welcome everyone to Already Cancelled. I am Peter, that is Tara, and we are going to talk about the Twilight Zone Season 3, Episode 10. It's called The Midnight Sun. So full spoilers for the episode as always. So this episode has the simple premise that the Earth has went out of orbit and is drifting slowly closer and closer towards the sun. So as you would expect, the Earth is getting warmer, the heat wave is getting unbearable, and it focuses primarily on two ladies, one who's elderly and one who's, well, not, basically, who share, well, not share apartments, they live across the hallway from each other, but they essentially become like a little duo and surviving together during this crisis. And the episode just kind of explores what that would be like, and there's kind of a twist, which we'll get to, but that's the basic gist of it. But Tara, how did you feel about The Midnight Sun?
I liked it. It was very good.
Would you care to elaborate on that in any way, shape, or form?
I mean, it was a fun premise. We sort of watched a movie that had the same premise, called The Day the Earth Caught Fire, which we also really liked.
It was,
but this was this was very different in that it was the same concept, but we're focusing just on two people and the world around them and how everybody is reacting to this doom and gloom ahead.
You get less than 25 minutes, so yeah, I mean, obviously that movie, it was a lot of about, okay, how did this happen? How can we try and fix it? What can we do? Like, there was a lot of that in that movie, as well as the larger effects. This is like, no, this is just a little bottle episode. It's about these two characters, and we'll learn some things about the world through what they hear on the radio or through other characters they briefly interact with, but...
You know, I'm going to love the episode where I watch people descend into madness. So, yeah, I thought it was really good.
I mean, it's how you get into our podcasts, after all, isn't it? Because I'm slowly descending into madness. No, I like the episode a lot. I have kind of one minor science critique, I think, which is not a big deal. It's just, you know, it's like, hey, this scientifically feels a bit odd, right? But I have one like proper kind of nitpick, which is that I think the quote-unquote twist ending is complete. It doesn't ruin the episode. It's because there's some episodes where the twist will kind of take away from the rest of it and ruin it. This doesn't do that. Nothing in this episode is actually like affected negatively by the ending. I just think the ending feels redundant and tacked on and meaningless.
It's sort of a double twist.
Yeah, I don't really feel the need for the ending. But other than that, I really liked it. I think this is marking a little trend here I'm noticing in season 3. One is that this felt a bit more stylish in how it was shot. You know, just because the opening scene is just, you know, the main, I should probably get their names here. Norma is the main sort of, you know, 30-something age lady, and she's like, you know, going around her apartment, and she's painting. It opens with her painting a portrait of the city. Is it a portrait? More of a landscape, I guess. But you know what I mean. She's painting the city, and she's painting the sun being really like dominant and big and like, you know, intimidating. And she's sweating and she's looking around, and this lasts like 2 minutes of just her going around her apartment. She's sweating. It's like focusing. There's like a Dutch angle of the thermometer, and there's like it just. But there's the music and the, you know, the direction really builds an atmosphere, and it returns to this atmosphere every so often. There'll be scenes where they're talking to each other, but then it'll return to a scene like this where it's just focusing on the atmosphere, on the mood of the heat, and all that stuff. So you've got that. I feel there's a lot more stylish direction recently. But the other thing that I really noticed in this episode, and is consistent with a couple of the recent episodes, maybe not the last two exactly, but 2 of the last 3 or 4, is this show is really touching some darker topics for the time period. Like,
definitely.
There's some stuff in this, and they can clearly only go so far, but there's definite implications at certain points in this episode.
There is there's a situation that happens a little over halfway through where the tension is very real, because you know what kind of dangers that those women are in. Yeah,
if I was watching The Road, you know, for us, this the post-apocalyptic movie from 2009-ish, or if I was watching basically anything where there's like a post-apocalyptic setting or whatever, for like a modern day movie, the things that might have happened in the situation that this episode has that was teasing would have went with it and would have ran further with it and would have done the dark thing And this episode just kind of broaches the topic and makes you think about it a little bit, just enough to be really disturbed. And then it even tells us about other things that are equally disturbing in other ways. So,
I also noticed the music in this one too. It was really very good. I mean, I can't really describe it too well. It's more of like a pulse, but I thought it was very good because there's a lot of moments where there's no dialogue. Like our main lady is there alone in her apartment and not really saying much, but there's something about the music that just adds to the heaviness of everything. Like it's very hot and the music's kind of a like a dull sound that keeps pounding, and it's really well directed.
It didn't sound like one of their tracks that they keep bringing back, because they have like a set number of tracks that you will see pop up, or hear I should say pop up time and time again throughout the show, and that's not a bad thing. They're kind of like notable little cues, and it makes you feel like the Twilight Zone. But this was definitely I think it was a new score. I don't think it had popped up in any previous episodes. Someone might correct us there and say, oh, technically it was.
If it was, it's the first time I noticed it. And I thought it fit the tone of the episode really well.
Yeah. So we're introduced to the neighbor, Mrs. Bronson, who's the second main character. And although we don't see her first, we actually see the door. There's a little girl at the door, and our main character of Norma wants to give her some water, which clearly is becoming a bit of a commodity. It's becoming something that's hard to come by. The water we hear is only turned on for 1 hour per day, and then it's turned off. They talk about the electricity turning off and never coming back on again, potentially at some point. That's bound to happen eventually. And we see this little girl, her family's leaving. They're driving somewhere, and they try and talk them out of it because we hear the highways are all jam-packed, and leaving the city's not the smartest thing, but because tons of people are trying it. But when they do leave and they wish them the best of luck, Mrs. Bronson's like, well, it's just us two now. We're the only ones left in the building. And it's like, okay, that's, dire. And we get, the next scene is Norma coming back with groceries, and she talks about how it's like chaos at the supermarket. And I was actually thinking of just at the start of lockdown, at the start of this year. I was like, oh, that's just sounding familiar. She
describes like a lot of people there are just like acting very insane. Yeah. But there's like one woman that she saw who just stood in the middle of the store crying. I'm like, oh, that's so sad.
Yeah.
It really painted a good picture of what her experience was.
I do really love bottle stories like this where it relies on just the conversation of the character, and it goes against like traditional filmmaking rules, which is showing is usually better than telling. But there is something in just like a one room or a one location story where hearing about stuff that's happened outside to add to the atmosphere of what's happening inside this place is really effective, and I really like it when it's used well, and I think it is used well in this episode.
Yeah, I agree.
But we see like the first signs of like the real kind of like the desperation coming, where Mrs. Bronson, like, she hears that she's got some cans of like fruit juice or something like that, and she like goes to get the can opener, and she's about to open it, and she drops it, but she grabs it out of her hand so sharply, and when she drops it, she like dives to the floor like a rabid dog, and then she sort of stops and realizes how bad she must look, like how feverish and like grabby she's being. And she kind of apologizes, and then she just sort of like bangs on the painting that she did, the Norma did of the sun, going, "Oh, what is with this sun? It's too much. I can't take it." And that goes into the ad break. One of the things that really stuck out to me in this is that Rod Serling's appearance at the start actually is like 5 minutes into the episode. We get a lot. It's not until after the family leave, because Mrs. Bronson says something like, I heard on the news that the sun, we're moving closer to the sun, and that's why we're. And then the camera goes over to Rod, and he's like, the word she's looking for is doomed.
Doom.
Yeah. So yeah, it was quite late on in the episode before he popped in. So the first half does a really great job of really setting up the world they're in, and the predicament that they found themselves in. The one sciencey thing I have to ask, because it's referenced later on, but Rod also mentions it here in his intro, is they mention that it's sunny all the time now. It's sunny 24 hours a day, and unless the Earth has stopped spinning or the axis has changed so much that now New York is like, sort of
in the North Pole,
has now become north, like further north. I can't understand why it would be sunny all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, the sun shouldn't be out that late unless something has happened drastically. But they are moving closer to the sun, so who knows? Maybe the Earth's parallax has changed, or
Yeah, like I assume it's still spinning, and I think if they mention specifically now it's sunny all the time in New York, but they don't. They just say it's sunny all the time. They never specify that it's just here. They kind of make it sound like the entire Earth is sunny all the time, and I'm like, even if it stops spinning though, half of the Earth has to be facing the other way.
Yeah, that's true.
So I'm not entirely sure how that's working, but you know what? It's fine. I'll let it go. Yeah. You want it to be called the Midnight Sun, even though it's the part that doesn't really make any sense.
I mean, if it's more like it's not that the sun's out that late, but it's still as hot as day at night, like that would make more sense.
Yeah, but they do mention it's midnight at some point, and it's like high noon.
Yeah.
I think the implication is that it's always high noon, basically, which makes no sense.
Right. Yeah.
Unless you're at like the North Pole.
Or if it's a fever dream.
True. That's okay. That's true. That's true. Before we get to the ending, though, the main thing that happens in the second half before that, when they're still, things are getting worse. Norma's like, she was wearing a normalish amount of clothes, whereas in the second half she's kind of like stripped to just,
Yeah, she's wearing like a slip.
It's basically as little as 60s TV would allow. It's essentially how I'd put it, and she's clearly sweating, and
I like how the older lady though is not allowed to wear a slip. She has to wear like a full robe and pajama set.
No, you're not attractive enough to be half naked. You're going to suffer. Is the attitude, I think. But essentially they realize that because they talk about, in fact, actually this is one of the things that drove me a little mad, not for the writing of the episode, but just for like in a real world context I got mad, is that there's a radio broadcast on at one point and the newscaster's talking about how, make sure you lock your doors, stay safe at home if you're staying in. All of the police are all focusing on the highways because that's where there's a lot of traffic right now, and they're trying to keep things civil and calm there. He basically says, yes, if there is any looters,
burglars.
Yeah, like literally, all of the inner city is undefended, and he actually tells people to like get weapons ready in case anyone like tries. And I'm like, you're just, it's open invitation. You're just telling everyone to go do it,
giving everyone ideas.
I know, crazy nonsense. But of course, that's like in their heads, and then the fire door from the roof is like hanging open, so they sort of lock themselves in Norma's apartment, and Norma gets her gun out. Although it's worth mentioning, they hear the voice first, or they hear the bang first. It doesn't speak. That's right, because it's quiet. It's very tense. It's a really well shot sequence, I thought.
Yeah.
Because it's very quiet, and Norma slowly goes and gets her gun, and comes back, and it's only her talking, saying, "Hey, we've got a gun. Leave here. Just leave and don't come back." She tries to talk him away, and poor Mrs. Bronson gets duped because he appears to leave, but when Norma looks out, says, "Oh, no one's went out the front. There's no one's left." So when Mrs. Bronson goes to open the door, he's there and he busts in.
Yeah.
And this is where I think we were talking about the implications of like how dangerous this actually is. That this deranged man is like broken into this apartment with just these two women.
Right.
And now he
he's
grabs
able
the gun
to get the gun away from her.
So there's a lot of dark implications here just from that alone. I think, much like a lot of horror films, I think it was very intentional that the leads for this were chosen to be women, because I think they want to have that sense of fear for this young woman living on her own. And this is the thing, is that he steals their water, drinks it, and then he throws the gun away and says, "No, I'm not this. Like, I'm not some asshole. I'm a good man. I had a wife." And then he tells us the story of how the wife died. And I thought he was building up to
super tragic.
Yeah, I thought he was building up to saying that she killed herself, which is, again, super dark for Twilight Zone in the 60s. But he actually talks about how she was pregnant and the baby essentially died immediately.
He said the baby didn't last an hour.
And then the wife went soon after. And he's basically been wandering the streets looking for supplies.
Water. Yeah, and he's just a broken man. And it's just, it paints a picture of how, like, these desperate times can turn somebody who was a good person into someone awful.
Yeah, it's definitely...
Even though he's fighting it, but...
it's definitely an idea again from a lot of like post-apocalyptic stuff or whatever that we've seen. You know, yeah, I think it's fair to say we've seen this particular part of it done better in the sense that we've seen these dark stories of characters who have become something bad or to survive or whatever. But
this still has like that 50s gloss or 60s gloss over it. Like, we're going to imply something, but really he's not so bad.
Yeah.
We'll tone it back.
But, it does clearly point to some things here, and it does give you it does paint the picture really well. And I was thoroughly engrossed throughout this, and it's just after this where earlier in the episode, Mrs. Bronson asked her to stop painting the sun and paint something cool, just so she could look at something that was... And she paints a waterfall, and it's after the guy leaves that Mrs. Bronson imagines she's under a waterfall, looking at this waterfall, she's transfixed, and then she faints and dies.
She gets like a heat stroke.
Yeah.
Or so we think.
Yeah, well, it's getting warmer every day, so presumably eventually everyone's just going to keel over.
Yeah.
And it's as she's doing this, again, very stylish here, the paint like starts melting on the canvas, so we see it dripping and like the image is ruined. The thermometer bursts and there's all this like tension rising and like the extreme close up on Norma's face as she's sweating, and she eventually screams, all building up to the waking up from the dream. And I get really upset for a second because I was like, oh no, what are you doing? This didn't need to be a dream. This didn't need this ending. It was just a good episode with a good story.
It was all a dream.
And then they throw in this weird double twist, which...
I don't mind. Like, I didn't mind at first I was like, oh, it's a fever dream, whatever. But then the other twist is the one I was like, oh, that's interesting. Like, I like instead of their Earth's orbit has been knocked towards the sun, it's the opposite that's happened. It's actually moving further away from the sun. And it's actually very cold. Much colder than it should be. And
they're all going to freeze to death. And Norma, who's delirious from her illness as she's waking up.
Yeah, wakes up and is like, oh, thank God I'm not there and I can feel cold again.
Yes, and then Mrs. Bronson, like the camera, like the lights go dark and the camera tracks into Mrs. Bronson's face and she's like, oh dear. Oh no.
She's probably the only person who's warm, like, in this planet because has a fever.
Yeah. Well, feels warm at least. I mean, technically, she'll still freeze to death even if she feels warm.
Sure.
I don't know what this accomplishes at the end. I don't know what this really does. This twist where they're doing the opposite.
It just puts it in a would you rather situation. Like, is she better off or not?
I mean, I suppose it's saying that there has to be a balance that, the extremes of either end are equally dangerous. It's not...
Yeah.
Which is that's a fine point. I don't know if it makes any sort of dramatic point though. Like, yeah, technically yes, from the science perspective, either end of the scale is equally dangerous. They're both going to kill you. But I don't know what it does dramatically for this. It's not like the episode has a theme that I think is enriched because the idea is it'd be equally bad the other direction. It's just, you just always want the opposite one because if you feel too hot, you want cold. If you feel too cold, you want hot. Whatever. So. Honestly, the last 2 minutes, I can take or leave. But everything before that, I loved. So. Yeah,
I don't hate the twist ending. I mean, obviously, I didn't love the fever dream because I thought that was kind of cheap, and not really necessary. We could have just ended on her screaming and dying, I suppose.
But yeah, we could have done.
Yeah. I mean, it still ends in a like they're all doomed. Which is what I wanted.
Yeah, no, honestly, because the build up to her screaming from the camera point of view, I really loved all those visuals and the paint dripping was all really good stuff. And I think just having her scream and then the camera just going up to the stars and just hearing Rod Serling go, and doomed they were, there was no saving them, for this is the Twilight Zone. Or that would have been perfect. I guess it'd have been like a minute and a half too short, but whatever.
Well, his introduction of what's coming up next could have been extra long.
Yeah, they could have just milked that a little bit. I suppose that's true. I did like this episode a lot. I want to make this clear. This was an excellent episode. I would say it's excellent. I think the last 2 minutes is completely unnecessary, but it doesn't ruin anything that comes before it. Because because like you say, they're still doomed. But B, you can just kind of ignore it and take her screaming as the ending. It's fine. Doesn't matter.
Yeah, a very good episode.
So no, I loved it. It was a perfect kind of build episode. So I think season 3 so far, I think has had a few great episodes recently, and I feel like we're hitting kind of a stride here in the middle of the season, which is nice. So hopefully the next one can keep that up. I'm not convinced based on this average rating on IMDb, but we'll see. We'll see. It's called Still Valley. Not a Confederate soldier. They like doing their Civil War episodes, don't they? Had a few of those.
I think Rod Serling was very famously anti-war. Something about, I think he had to fight in World War II or something.
That sounds timeline-wise about right.
Mm-hmm. So I think there are a lot of war episodes because of that.
Yeah, I know. I mean, the point of most war movies or anything is that the point is we shouldn't do this. Here's why we shouldn't do this.
There's a lot of World War II movies that are very pro-military.
Yeah, okay. Of course, at the time there was the propaganda war movies. I'm saying that anything made outside of wartime.
Mm-hmm.
How many pro-war movies do you think have been made since the 50s?
Well, there's a lot of I'd say post 9/11 there's a lot of pro-military, be a patriot again.
I suppose, but yeah, pro-military is not necessarily well, they're wrong, okay? War's bad. War's always bad. And that's
war is not the answer.
Yes, I mean, I'm not saying don't defend ourselves if should things happen, but there's no point in going looking for war. Anyway. What is it good for? Absolutely nothing, I say. Nothing!
Say it again.
Anyway, so yeah, he says that this is one for Civil War buffs, which is a very American thing that no one else cares about. But also fans of the occult, which is a really interesting thing to throw in there. So here's a description on IMDb. In June 1860, I said 1963. That'd have been technically the future at the time of the episode coming out. In June 1863, Confederate soldiers come across a warlock who can help bring victory to the Southern cause. Oh, very interesting. Do you know what? I'm just realizing actually, the Civil War was around 100 years old when the Twilight Zone was on, so maybe there was a lot more interest in doing stuff about it because it was a century at the time. And in the same way, we didn't get a bunch of World War I stuff, but we got a few things recently, during the World War I century.
Right, we got
years.
They Shall Not Grow Old, we got Wonder Woman, and 1917, which is the best movie of last year that didn't win Best Picture.
I agree, it was the best movie of last year. I don't usually love war movies, but I loved that one.
Yeah.
Technical masterpiece, quite frankly. But that was it technically did just miss the actual. I feel like it got delayed a year. It was meant to come out in 1918, if not 2018, if not 2017. But it got pushed for delays because movies get delayed and it's fine. But yeah, so because I will shit you not, when we're a bit older and World War II is hitting the century, I guarantee you there's going to be tons of World War II stuff at that time again. It's going to happen. But
it's gonna be weird to live in a world without the Greatest Generation.
I guess.
I think most of them are gone anyway, but
It's been a while. It's been a while since World War II at this point.
Yeah.
But yeah. That said, though, defeating Nazis is always in fashion, I think. No one's ever too upset about that.
No.
So, that's fine. Anyway, there you go. That's where we're going next with Twilight Zone. Not that specifically, obviously. We're going to Still Valley, which is the Warlock and the Confederates. So, let us know what you thought of this episode in the comments below. You may like and subscribe, all that stuff. You can, of course, get us on the Twitters at mailed_fuzz for channel updates. And Tara's going to tell you all about how you can support us financially with real monies.
Yeah, I suppose. If you enjoy these reviews, please check out our Patreon page. It's patreon.com/mildfuzztv. And if you donate as low as $1 per month, you will get access to bonus episodes of other shows we do, including The Ace, which is our science fiction movie review show. So you may enjoy those. And if you donate $5 per month, you'll get access to these Twilight Zone episodes 1 week early. Fun.
Yeah. And I'll just reiterate that one of the earlier episodes we did was on the day the Earth caught fire, which had a very similar premise, but expanded upon it that this episode had. So
yes,
check that one out. Well, check out the movies, because the movie was really good. Just to spoil the general thoughts, it was a really good movie.
It was a good find.
Yeah, it was one of those ones where I think it's technically a British movie, so it's not one that's talked about as much, but it actually was quite a nice, oh, this is a good discovery.
Yeah.
This is actually
It's
a really good
definitely a
movie.
hidden gem.
So cool. All right, there you go. That's Twilight Zone. Thank you once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching TV in the Twilight Zone.